listening to the only podcast in Ontario that keeps you in the game.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right, let's do this.
I want to touch base on something else here that you brought up about the mental strength coaching or the mental aspect of the game. How important is that for our young baseball players or athletes moving forward?
It's paramount. What comes first, the chicken or the egg, the confidence or the success? Well, I don't know how it is with hockey, but if you're a baseball player and you swing a bat, you better learn how to deal with failure, because Hall of Famers fail 7 times out of 10, and they go to the Hall. Now, 300 is not a real good batting average in high school, but in professional baseball, 300 is always going to be a good batting average, especially if you tack on a good OPS. But mental skills for me, and this was the difference maker, this was one of the weakest parts of my game, most of my game. And it wasn't until I fell flat on my face in 1998 that I realized, wow, this is something that I need to address. I was afraid of failure. I was afraid of success. I didn't know how to move from one at-bat to the other. Mentally, I got in my way. And look, I played 22 years and I still survived. Okay? But had I had a handle on the mental aspect of my game from a young age, who knows what could have happened. Probably would have avoided a lot of pitfalls, both on and off the field. I drank throughout my career just as a way to come down off the game, the anxiety. I had a lot of problems with that at one point and had to walk away from it for a good chunk of my life. And, it comes down to, we worry about, can the guy throw it through a brick wall? Can he hit it a country mile? But we don't address whether or not a kid who's sitting there in the passenger seat on the way home from a bad game is going to mentally recover, learn how to deal with it. That's the beauty of amateur sports. They've got 3-4 days to figure it out, 3 or 4 days to grind it out in the batting cage and fix what's wrong, or do nothing and just hope for the best. Whereas in pro ball, you wake up the next morning and you strap it on again. Pro hockey, you play what? Every other game? You play an 81-game season. Baseball is double that in the same amount of time, roughly. So it's sorely lacking, and it's not hard. It's understanding that, it's understanding how to talk to yourself as an athlete, as a human being. It goes way beyond the sports, the arena. It goes way beyond the arena. It goes into your daily life. The program that I'm working with my kids right now, I listen to it because, I went through it all because I wanted to make sure that the messages that were being sent to my kids were consistent with my values and my experience as a player. And it was very similar messages that I had learned from a guy named Harvey Dorfman a long time ago, brilliant sports psychologist, wrote The Mental Game of Baseball and The Mental Game of Pitching, the book that Roy Halladay made famous. It's a good message, and it's something that players can draw from on a daily basis, and not just at the ballpark or in the arena. It spills over into your life. Just learning how to talk to kids. My motto with regards to coaching is, I'm firm but fair. I understand. I'm sympathetic, but I hold you accountable. I know how hard it is to play the game of baseball, and I always will. I'll never forget it, because I wasn't a superstar. I was a grinder. Mentally, I'll take a guy with middle-of-the-road talent with a strong mental game any day of the week.
I will take a dozen of those, Greg.
Any day of the week, because I know that when the chips are down, that kid's going to be there for me. Any day of the week.
That's what I always loved about your work ethic, Greg. You were always a freaking grinder. Let's go back to the day that you were drafted. How was that? You finally got to draft day.
Well, it was the draft was bittersweet for me. I was a projected 3rd or 4th round pick until I signed a letter of intent to go to play for the University of Texas. And nobody told me that was a bad thing. like, holy crap, I'm a California kid doing something that has not been done before. Gone to the University of Texas to play for the Longhorns. Hadn't been done. Not to mention I had a full ride, which was unbelievable at that time because they only have 11 and a half scholarships for the entire roster, and they were going to spend a full one on me. And I was like, okay, if I get drafted in the third round and the money's there, I'm going to sign. Well, they called me. I was sitting there. They didn't have the internet back then. So I'm sitting there and I'm waiting and waiting and waiting. I was working construction. And I remember my mom let me take her cell phone, which was one of those big suitcase-looking ones that you carried around.
Yeah.
Because she was a subcontractor, had a glass company. And so I was able to take her cell phone with me to the construction site. So I was, within an earshot. I was hanging drywall. And the whole day goes, I don't get drafted. And now I remember I was in my bedroom and I was like, what the actual F you know what? And I was like, there's no way. There's no way. I went the full first day without getting drafted. And the phone rang and I was like, okay, this has got to be it. The scout on the other end of the line was a guy named Paul Fryer. He was the Orioles, and the guy who ended up signing me. And this was illegal as hell. He called me and said, well, the first day of the draft happened and you didn't get drafted. And I'm like, well, no shit. I was pretty pissed. He's like, well, we got the first pick in the draft tomorrow. If we take you, will you take this for a signing bonus? And I said, yeah, just draft me and we'll get it done. So they draft me in the 17th round instead of the 16th. And the guy comes to the house, and I'm like, at this point, I'm just like, I want to sign. And it was the Orioles, which was bittersweet because my uncle played for the Orioles. I grew up an Orioles fan, so I was like, all right, cool. They know who I am. They like me because I can play, and because my uncle's Rick Dempsey, their last World Series champion MVP. Well, they show up at the house, and they're like, well, we changed our mind. We're not going to be able to give you this. My mom threw him out of the house. So I was like, oh, crap, that's not good. She's like, I'm not dealing with people that renege on their deal. This was their word. We're not doing this. So I went away to the Olympic Festival, and I played for the West region, got chosen to be the starting catcher on Team USA, went away to Trois Rivières, played the World Championships. I had a monster summer, hit a bunch of homers, really played well. Everybody knew I could play defense. I was a big league catcher at age 18, but couldn't hit a lick. When they put a wood bat in my hand, that was a mess. But could hit within aluminum. So all of a sudden, I come back from that summer, and the money's a lot better. So I got like third round money in the 17th round. So I signed and I went to play. Worst decision of my entire life. Should have gone to college. Should have taken that scholarship to the University of Texas. Physically, I wasn't ready to swing a wood bat. Took me a long time to get it together. Probably 18 months of swinging a wood bat before I finally got the hang of it. At 21 years old, the year I would have been eligible to get drafted, I was hitting 300 in Double-A with a wood bat at 21. That, to me, with my defense, that translates into first-round draft pick, which would have changed everything because they do not draft impact players outside of the first 3 rounds unless there's something terribly wrong, something terribly goes wrong. I was giddy to go, but when I got to pro ball, I realized how overmatched I was on the offensive side. Like I said, defensively, no problem. I can catch and throw with anybody. But offensively, it was a struggle. I went to an instruction league. I was playing with Double-A, Triple-A guys. So my first roommate in pro ball was Kurt Schilling. He had just gotten done with his first taste of the show. Chris Hoyles was there. Ben McDonald was there. A lot of Double-A guys, Triple-A guys. I got my ass handed to me by them and the Japanese teams that came over. Hiroshima Carp and the Chunichi Dragons came over to do some instructional league. These were big leaguers in Japan. I got 2 hits the entire time. They stopped the game when I got my first hit. It didn't happen until like the week before we left, and made a big deal out of it. when I came back the next spring, they sent me to the Midwest League for A ball. I went 13 for my first 100. My first pro hit was a homer. I got 12 hits in the next 99 at bats. So they didn't have an instructional league that year because I had no business being in that league either. So then they sent me to rookie ball, and then I started to figure it out. I was playing against other high school guys, small college guys, and there I hit 300 and started to figure some things out offensively. But still, I didn't even really figure it out until 2 or 3 years later in AA when I hit 300 against some real talent. Got called up to AAA, hit 400 in the playoffs. Man, it was a process. It's not a foregone conclusion that you sign that contract, you go out and you play, and everything's going to work out for you. It's a grind, man. It's every day.
It goes back to what we were talking about before, Greg. You put in your time. You didn't get rushed. You seasoned yourself in the minors. You had a 16-year major league career. You can thank some of the time in the minors for that, right?
Well, I look at my timeline. I looked at the struggles that I had in the minor leagues. They got me ready. Well, I had to learn how to call a ball game. And the only way a guy really learns how to call a ball game is if you make your own mistakes. That's what I hate about college ball. You got coaches sitting over there like this calling every stinking pitch because they're worried about their jobs. When the catcher should be the one calling the game. I remember, a little side note, I remember with Matt Wieters. He was the first-round pick by the Orioles. We called him switch-hitting Jesus in Baltimore. He was going to be the savior of the organization. I remember sitting there. I was going to be mentoring him. When he came to the big leagues, I took a back seat. I was the starter, then I was the backup, all planned. And I remember sitting down to him, and we were talking about game calling. And I said, "When was the first time you ever called your own game?" He goes, "First game of pro ball." First game of pro ball. So all his entire life, he had the game called for him. That's what the minor leagues are for. You learn how to call the game. You make those mistakes. You feel that sting. You need to learn how to play the game. You need to deal with the ups and downs. You need to learn how to police yourself off the field when you're, no longer supervised by mom, dad, high school coach, college coach. Easy to get out of control because, trust me, when you're living with 5 guys, nobody's checking IDs to see, whether you're legal drinking age. And things can get out of control real quickly. The whole lifestyle. What do you think's open at 11 o'clock at night, Monday through Friday? Not a whole lot of healthy options out there for you. But sure, you got to be able to do all that stuff.
How big of an adjustment was it, Greg, going from the lifestyle of the minors with the travel and the living arrangements to once you got to the show? What was the biggest change? Like, how different was it?
The travel was fun. I'm not gonna lie. I enjoyed the bus trip, sitting around in your underwear, playing cards, drinking beers, and we did. That's what we did. The camaraderie, the fellowship in the minor leagues was a lot greater. The big leagues, there was a little bit of it at the beginning of my career. There were still some salty veterans around who would hang out in the clubhouse and drink a few beers and talk the game. The travel in the minor leagues is not easy. I mean, we were making pennies. I remember the big deal was we'd go to Taco Bell. They'd pull the bus over at Taco Bell for the 69-cent value menu. We ate shitty. We slept. Like, I remember we had one place that we lived in Kane County in Geneva, Illinois. We had it was a 1-bedroom loft apartment. Now imagine this. We had two double beds upstairs and a blow-up mattress in the walk-in closet and another blow-up mattress on the floor in the loft. And then one guy slept on the couch and I had a blow-up mattress under the staircase. That was a 1-bedroom apartment. We're living in crummy dives. We're eating in crummy dives. Back then, they didn't have great ballparks. I mean, the King County ballpark was brand new, so it was awesome. South Bend was fun to play in. But all that stuff, that's what character building is about. That's what paying dues is all about. You deal with all that so that when you get to the big leagues, you have a certain amount of respect for it. They don't do that anymore. I got in trouble once for using the word hazing in a context of in an interview about my early days in the big leagues, and oh man, did social media blow up, and oh, there's no room in the game for that. And I'm like, what? The hierarchy in a clubhouse, the respect for the guys that came before you, the older guys teaching the young guys the ropes, not only how to play the game, but how to behave in the clubhouse. I mean, boy, they don't make the young guys do that anymore. I mean, you were seen and not heard. You didn't touch the radio until you were arbitration eligible. All that stuff. Nowadays, these young kids would laugh their bags off if you suggested that they have to pay dues or put in some time before they can do and say whatever they want. That all prepared us for the big leagues. The crowds got bigger and bigger and bigger. The travel got better and better. It got really crappy in Double-A because the road trips were like 12, sometimes 20 hours. A-ball or Triple-A, you flew a lot of places, but you were up at 4:30, 3 connections. So when you got to the big leagues and you jumped on your first charter, you were like, what do you mean you want me to bring you a bag of beer? You want me to serve the veteran players? Let me see if that's going to be cool for me. Okay, sure. What do you want? How would you like your steak cooked, Mr. Ripken? You didn't care. Can I carry your bags? Can I shine your shoes? Teach me something. That was how it was, and we were happy to do it. And the rituals, the initiation is, I guess, is a better word than the H word. That was all part of it. That all prepared me. The struggles, the ups and downs of those years in the minor leagues prepared me for Jim Leyland. Jim Leyland 1998 was the toughest year of my career. But that year is when Jim taught me how to be a big league ball player. He developed thick skin on me, understood how to deal with general managers and veteran teammates, how to be seen and not heard, which is real tough for a chatty guy like me. But I learned a lot that year. I learned more in failure that year, and admittedly, I had to be rebuilt psychologically. I was in such a dark place at the end of that failure year. I had buck 83 and 300 plate appearances. And I had been squawking about, hey, I can play every day. I'm a big league starter. Wah, wah, wah. I wasn't at that point. But it was the ramping up of the challenge, the struggle, the life experiences that led me to Jim. And then Jim leading me to another place to where I could manage the rest of my career, the ups and downs, the injuries, the success, the failures. It's all part of the process. If you skip one, the end result's not going to be as strong as if you lay the foundation brick by brick.
So you're in the majors, you're character building, you're building your resume, and then you move to the Marlins, who eventually win the World Series in 1997. But what was that move like to the Marlins? Do you remember?
Well, I remember crying the day I got traded. Couldn't believe it. Couldn't believe I had gotten sent down. I broke with the club in 96. Made a couple of mental errors, out there as a young catcher. There was a lot of blame pointed at me being a young catcher. We had some veteran pitchers like Scotty Erickson and a couple other, Kevin Brown. I think he was there. Some guys that they expected to be successful that weren't. And it certainly wasn't any fault of mine. I did what they told me to do. When they shook their head, I put down an alternative. And, a lot of the blame fell on me. I got sent back to the minor leagues. Was down there like 2 or 3 weeks, and I get traded to the Marlins as a player to be named later. So I go from playoff-bound team in 96 to last-place team in 96 with the Marlins. The worst part about that was my dream of being an everyday guy. I went from, now I'm backing up a guy who's a couple of months younger than me, and Charles Johnson, who'd already won a Gold Glove. I was like, wow, this couldn't be any worse. 97 rolls around, the off season, they sign Leland, then they go out and then they sign Alex Fernandez and Moises Alou and Jimmy Eisenreich and all these different great players that came. Bobby Bonilla. I mean, they bought the farm, and I remember how special a time it was in the off season coming in. And I remember one of my favorite Jim Leland stories. I remember him coming into the weight room that day as we're doing our physicals, getting ready to drive north to Melbourne. And he's smoking his cigarette. He walks into the weight room, and he's like, "Well, I see you can pump your biceps, but can you get a hit against a tough right-handed pitcher? Can you throw somebody out?" I'm like, "Yeah, nice to meet you too. Yeah, I can do that." And then later on that day, he stopped me, looked me dead in my eye, and said, "Hey, listen, do me a favor. Don't show up to spring training." I was like, "What's that? Why?" He goes, "Because if I have to play you, you won't make the team."
Wow.
And I'm like, "All right, this guy's got a good sense of humor. He must know that I respond to that kind of stuff. I'm a tough love kind of guy. Here I am thinking of him like my grandpa George, military, all gruff and mean and angry all the time. But then next thing you know, he's got his arms around you and he's telling you how much he loves you. That's what I grew up in. Well, I got to spring training. I was the first guy at the ballpark the next day. He's walking by again with a cigarette in his mouth, and he stops and he looks at me and he goes, "I thought I told you not to show up." And I'm like, "You were serious?" He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, you're here now. Let's make the best of it." And I mean, I could go on and on for hours and hours about different things that this guy said to me, different things that happened during that year. But the one thing I will say, I had a really good year that year as backup. A lot of the credit, is deservedly, me. I was the one swinging the bat, catching and throwing the ball. But Jim matched me up against some guys that I could have some success against, which is his job, by the way. That's the manager's job. This is pre-matchup baseball like they're playing nowadays. The Joe Madden approach to managing a team where you've got four different platoons and every day is a matchup. It wasn't like that. Back then, you put your best 7 or 8 players on the field every day. They played all the time, and you rode those horses until they bucked you, which I believe in. That would be my method as well. But we went along. It was a magical year. We were so talented in our starting lineup and our starting rotation. We underachieved all season long and still had the 3rd best record in baseball behind the Orioles and the Braves. We kicked the crap out of the Braves. I think we beat them 12 out of 16 times. A kid named Tony Saunders beat him 4 times by himself. We get to the playoffs. We sweep the Giants round 1. We beat the Braves in 6 games in the NLCS. Everybody was looking for they wanted a repeat of the Yankees in Atlanta. And we spoiled the party. So did Cleveland. We played the worst baseball of our season in the World Series and still won in 7 games. And had it not been for a big error by Tony Fernandez, we probably would have lost that World Series. Mike Hargrove, I remember it like it was yesterday, had Jarrett right on the mound. Bobby Bonilla led off the 6th and the 7th inning with a home run, and he pushed the panic button. And here comes Joe Table, as we used to call him, Jose Mesa. He played his playbook, and it ended up costing him. As soon as they brought him in the game, we knew we were going to win. It was a magical time. I was in the right place at the right time with the right group of guys. But I can tell you one thing. We don't win that World Series without Darren Dalton, Craig Counsell. Darren Dalton was the glue that held that ball club together, or I should say glued it together. Before he got there at the trade deadline, there was a bunch of superstar players going in opposite directions. Still winning ball games, but not a cohesive unit. Darren Dalton got there. I'll never forget it. First day in the uniform. We got our ass kicked in Cincinnati by the worst team in the National League. He got us together at the bottom of the stairs at the old riverfront. And he's like, "I can't believe I waived my no trade clause to play with you guys." And he was using some expletives. He was like, "Oh, we always knew in Philly we loved playing you guys because you guys were a bunch of expletives, softies. We knew eventually you guys would quit, this and that." Well, I tell you, after that day, after we're getting chewed out by that veteran grinder ball player, man, we were rowing the boat in the same direction, sprinkling Craig Counsell that gave us a real steadying influence at second base. Louis Castillo, who ended up being a really good player, wasn't quite ready yet. All raw talent. Craig made all the routine plays. He put the ball in play. He was a serviceable situational hitter. Without those 2 guys right there, that doesn't happen. We don't win that World Series. And, we got a couple breaks there, but bittersweet. And then, good God, talk about penthouse to outhouse, the fire sale the next winter. Of course, I was one of the guys left in the aftermath, and I was just couldn't even believe it. couldn't even believe he didn't keep that team together for longer than a year. It was that '98 season was hard to take, man. It was hard. A lot of losses.
That's the unfortunate part of the business now is keeping up with the Joneses or the Yankees and the Red Sox, right? I mean, the big payroll, the big contracts, the small market teams just don't have it there. They lose the players to free agency. They continue to try to rebuild through the draft. It just doesn't work. It's like a 1 year thing, and then those players are gone. But let's move your career to Toronto. Let's talk about some of the players that were there. The relationship that you have with Roy Halladay, how was that, Greg?
Roy was easy to work with. He was very well prepared. He took all the responsibility. It was a mental day off. His day was a mental day off for me. The only thing I had to do was keep him from being predictable. His predictability was the reason I hit him so well when I switched teams because I knew what Roy was going to do. But Roy, he wasn't warm and fuzzy in the clubhouse. He was all business. He wasn't a guy who played cards. He wasn't a guy that played video games. He was either working out, eating, throwing a bullpen, watching video, or actually pitching a ball game. But he went there and he put in a full 8-hour day. There's a lot of speculation as to how he developed that mindset, that attitude. Could have been the demotion back all the way back to A-ball that made it happen. I don't know. Roy never really shared that with me. He and I were close. His closest relationship was with a guy named Donovan Santos, was the strength coach. He spent a lot of time with Donovan, and they lived near each other in Florida as well. But Roy was a hard guy to know. He was a gruff guy, put on this angry face the day he started. Early on in my tenure there, I made it clear to him that he could stomp around the clubhouse and storm around and grunt at people, except me. I reminded him of my service time. I reminded him that I was the guy putting the fingers down, and that if he didn't want me to start telling people what was coming, he would start to treat me with a little bit more respect. And from that point on, we never had a problem. I was close to him. I think as close to anybody that played with him, I'd like to think. We didn't exchange, Christmas cards or anything like that, but, I was very close to his son, Braden. Loved Brandy. I had a home down in the area. Spent time with them whenever I could. I used to go over to the house. I was devastated when I found out he died. Just watching highlights of the upcoming documentary that's coming, I welled up again. And it's a very traumatic thing. A lot of things have come up about Roy that nobody knew, other than maybe his wife and maybe Donovan had an idea. I don't know. But his teammates certainly did know about his demons. Roy was a great teammate as far as being prepared and doing his job, but wasn't really there for other guys to be like, oh yeah, how do you do this and how do you do that? It wasn't like that. He wasn't that warm and fuzzy uncle that that was there to put his arm around the younger players and do this. And we had our chances, but the main people wonder, like, we had that 1 year where we actually won more games than the Cardinals, who won the World Series. The problem that is we just didn't compete in the division. We couldn't compete with Boston or New York. They had they developed players better. They developed more of them, and the organization at the time wouldn't spend. They went for it big time with B.J. Ryan and A.J. Burnett, but that wasn't enough. BJ was a guy who loved that guy to death as a teammate and as a friend. But let's be honest, that guy was walking a high wire act every time he went out there to close a ball game. You rarely saw a quick 3 up and 3 down from him. So it was always going to be a grind. AJ was just learning how to pitch at the time. He was in the right place at the right time as far as free agency and ability, so to speak. He had better numbers after he moved on, but we just didn't have the core. Vernon Wells' career started to take a nosedive after Carlos Delgado's departure. when the league figured out that you didn't need to throw Vernon strikes, they stopped, and he wouldn't stop swinging the bat, wouldn't pass the baton. Great, talented center fielder, but once he got injured, it exposed the fact that he wasn't a fitness standpoint. He wasn't a hard worker off the field with regards to taking care of his body. Didn't really take weight training too seriously until he became injured, and then all of a sudden that was a priority. But too little, too late, in my opinion. There were some glimpses there. There were some guys there that gave us a chance, but we never had that one. Once Carlos Delgado left, we didn't have that offensive threat to hit behind Vernon. We didn't have that secondary pitcher to match up with the legit ones and twos of Boston. We always had Roy, but we didn't have that legit number two to get us over the hump against Boston or New York. And our offense was, not nearly as potent as either one of theirs.
Make sure you tune into the third and final segment of In the Game with Gregg Zaun tomorrow.